Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation for subject COM221, Assessment 1, Part B. My name is Lawler, and I'll be talking about the drum episode from Wednesday the 6th of March 2019. So the issue that I found most interesting in this episode of the drum was this segment on what is the next election about. Specifically, the comment by Amy Remekis that fear campaigns work. The segment highlights a number of campaign messages from the coalition government that centre on a strategy of fear-mongering. That is, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, the action of deliberately arousing public fear or alarm about a particular issue. It's been widely called out in the media that Scott Morrison's campaign attempts to incite fear that Labor's policies will create a weaker Australia. He's doing this to create negative sentiment amongst the public to sway voters. In an opinion piece, Election 2019 Brings Scare Campaigns Back into Play by Michelle Grattan, published in The Conversation on the 1st of February 2019, Grattan outlines the success of fear campaigns used in previous elections in Australia. She particularly highlights the success of the 1980 Fraser campaign, where a fear campaign was launched warning on the threat to the family home in response to Labor's increasing capital gains tax on family housing. This last-minute campaign caught the attention of voters and fueled public sentiment, resulting in an unlikely election win for Fraser at the time. Now, Grattan cites in her article from the notes of former Liberal Federal Director Tony Eggleton at the time of the 1980 election, and he said that the negativity and the tactics were controversial, even among the Liberals, but the political hardheads were of the view that the end justified the means. Thus, we finally end up at the point that truly interests me from an ethics point of view, and that is, in regards to fear campaigns, do the ends justify the means? Or, posed differently, does it matter that politicians use fear to gain power? If we look to history, the concept of fear campaigns in politics and advertising is not new. The effectiveness of using fear is apparent from examples throughout history, such as Hitler's rise to power and the 1997 National Tobacco Campaign in Australia. In recent times, the 2016 Trump election campaign provides a fascinating case study in the use of fear campaigns. An article published in The Atlantic on September the 2nd, 2016, entitled Donald Trump and the Politics of Fear by Molly Ball, provides an overview of Trump's strategy and insight into how fear campaigns work prior to his election win. Interestingly, Ball states in that article that Trump's chances of winning the election, if the normal categories hold in this election, the patterns of turnout, the states in play, the partisan and demographic divides, it is almost impossible for Trump to prevail. Ball then goes on to say quite prophetically, if fear is strong enough, it can accomplish something exceedingly rare. It can override people's pre-existing partisan commitments. And in the case of Donald Trump, this proved to be correct and he won the presidential election. Getting back to the question, does it matter that politicians use fear to gain power? Is the strategy of using fear ethical? Do the ends justify the means? First, let's quickly take a peek at the theory of consequentialism, a branch of normative ethics used to question whether the consequences of an action is morally good or bad. In a nutshell, the theory of consequentialism focuses on the consequences of actions rather than the act itself. You'll also see a little definition there on utilitarianism, which I'll come back to in a moment. Context, the term, the end justifies the means, focuses not on the actions or means taken to achieve an end, but what were the results of the end achieved. If we delve further into consequentialism, the theory is divided up into schools of thought, one being utilitarianism, where the consequential belief is that we should pursue the greatest good for the greatest number. Using this school of thought, if the consequences of Scott Morrison's policies and agenda achieve more good than bad to the majority, then the action of using fear to win power is justified. So that's a theory, albeit a simplified version. But how does Scott Morrison's ethical justification in the use of fear campaigns sit with my personal ethics and as a voter? While I understand the theory, I'm uncomfortable that consequentialism doesn't factor in a person's integrity or core values into the ethics of their action. So, for example, if Scott Morrison sees using fear against his personal values, but proceeds for the greater good, what trust can I place in a person that doesn't hold true to their core values? What I've just described is the definition of virtue ethics, where the moral good is based on the person's virtue in achieving an action, not on the consequence. Now, avid readers, I like the idea of virtue ethics, but am I able to practice virtue ethics in every decision that I make on a daily basis? According to virtue ethics, telling a lie is immoral, but I told my daughter that there were no mushrooms in her dinner last night, so she would eat with no complaints. Consequentialism justifies my actions because the consequences meant she had a good portion of vegetables and my family were able to finish dinner in peace. Greatest good for the greatest number. But virtue ethics tells me that a lie is morally wrong. Is my personal ethics different to how I behave ethically in my professional life? Is telling my daughter a lie different to telling a lie to my employer? The consequences of which tell me that lying to my employer, for example, may affect my reputation or could result in me losing my job. Or conversely, maybe the lie would help me to keep my job. Would I lie to keep my job? A question as we journey down the rabbit hole of this subject is, what stops us from using whatever ethical theory that best fits the situation to justify the decisions or actions that we make? I would argue that rules play a role in this. We use rules like law, religion, societal and cultural norms, relationships and specified codes of conduct to guide our ethical decisions, and we use ethical theory as a framework to assist in deciding what is good or bad. So, has Scott Morrison broken any rules by employing a fear campaign? In 2018, Scott Morrison released a set of ministerial standards through the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. And in his release statement, he said, "The Australian people deserve a government that will act with integrity and in the best interest of the people they serve. Serving the Australian people as ministers and assistance ministers is an honour and comes with expectations to act at all times to the highest possible standards of probity. All ministers and assistant ministers are expected to conduct themselves in line with standards established in this statement in order to maintain the trust of the Australian people." So, looking at that, has Scott Morrison acted with integrity in using fear tactics? Amy Ramikis summed this up on the drum episode by saying that the coalition has found a line that they think is going to resonate with people. They'll keep saying it no matter what side of politics they're from. This would suggest that Scott Morrison's strategy is in opposition to the very standards he has enacted as part of these ministerial standards. But under the microscope of consequentialism, we know that his integrity doesn't apply, only the consequences of his actions. I think also an interesting question to explore over this subject is, how do ethical situations change over time? In Tony Eggleton's statement about using fear in the 1980s, he suggests that it wasn't something that sat well with Liberal Party members. Fast forward 40 years, how has the ethical reasoning changed? Is it viewed by the same standards as it was in 1980? As society evolves and precedents or rules for ethical behaviour are set and challenged, what relevancy does the past have to modern ethical standards? So, in conclusion, dear readers, it is all comes back to the statement, does the end justify the means? And after all that lively debate, in this instance, I leave you with watch this space. Because we don't yet know what the end is. The election hasn't played out. We don't yet fully understand what the consequences of Scott Morrison's actions are. The polls will tell us ultimately what the public believes of Scott Morrison's use of fear campaigns and if the end justifies the means. Thank you for watching, and I wish you all luck as you move forward in this subject. Thank you.